Well, we begin the bulletin with our focus on Canada. MEA has hit out at Canada after Khalistan floats were seen in Malton, saying that democratic countries should not allow intimidation by radical elements in the name of freedom of expression. Now, in an official statement, the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal has said that celebration and glorification of violence should not be a part of the civilized society. He said that the democratic countries which respect the rule of law should not allow intimidation by radical elements in the name of freedom of expression. He also added that India has repeatedly raised strong concerns about the violent imagery being used by extremist elements in Canada against the Modi government. Last year, in fact, a float depicting the assassination of India's former Prime Minister was used in a procession. And Jaiswal has stated this, in fact, adding that the display of posters of Indian diplomats have also been put out across Canada, threatening violence against them. At the Nagar Kirtan parade in Malton last year, floats of Prime Minister Narendra Modi were floated by Khalistani terrorists were seen demonstrating to sentence him for assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. This is the particular matter in hand, and remember, diplomatic tensions have been rife between India and Canada for quite some time now over the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, ever since Canada claimed that Indian government has links with this particular murder that had taken place. With that, now we're shifting our focus to a different story. This is with regards to British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has now claimed that a malign actor has compromised the UK Armed Forces payment system in response to reports of China's involvement in the database breach. And he added that the Ministry of Defence has taken the network offline and taken steps to ensure affected individuals receive assistance. The BBC and other media reported that China had been behind a cyber attack on the payroll system used by Britain's Ministry of Defence, containing personal information and banking details of the personnel serving in the Royal Navy, Army and Royal Air Force. Listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say on the entire matter.
There are indications that a malign actor has compromised the armed forces payment network, but I do want to reassure people that Ministry of Defence has already taken action in removing the network offline, taking it offline and making sure that people affected are supported in the right way. Now, there's a limit to what I can say about this now, but the Defence Secretary will be making a full statement to Parliament later today. Now, the IDF took control of the Rafa border crossing between Gaza and Egypt on Tuesday, pushing into the southern Gazan town after a night of airstrikes and as prospects for a ceasefire deal hung in the balance. Tanks were seen moving in the area, and the Israeli army said that the military had been operating since last night in a specific area of the eastern Rafa, from which it said most people and some international organizations had evacuated. The IDF also said Karim's Shalom crossing was closed on Tuesday for security reasons and will reopen once the security situation allows. Meanwhile, Netanyahu, while reacting to the IDF strikes in Rafah, said that Israel will continue until they get absolute victory, until they score absolute victory in this particular region. And these are the latest visuals from the Rafah crossing in Gaza. Now, continuing to keep our focus on Rafah, smoke billowed over Rafah on Tuesday as the IDF took control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt, while tanks advanced into the southern Gazan city of Rafah. International mediators struggled to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas amidst the escalating conflict. Now, despite international appeals for Israel to refrain from assaulting Rafah, Israeli tanks and aircraft targeted several areas and residences overnight. The IDF stated that its limited operation in Rafah aimed to eliminate the fighters and dismantle infrastructure utilized by Hamas, the governing authority in Gaza. Now, if we speak of casualties from the Israeli strikes in Rafa, these people were rushed to Kuwaiti hospital, where medics were seen attending to injuries while grieving families gathered around the bodies of their loved ones. The Israeli military announced on Tuesday that it had taken operational control of the Palestinian side of Gaza's southern Rafa crossing, which borders Egypt, and that special forces were scanning this area. It stated that operations had been ongoing since the last night in a specific area of the eastern Rafah, from which it claimed that most civilians and some international organizations had evacuated. Now, next up, we take your focus to protests that has taken place. These are pro-Palestinian protests, mark you, gathered outside of the Hunter College in New York. And this was on Monday near the Met Gala, an annual fundraiser for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute. Now, these protesters held up leaflets reading "End the occupation of Palestine, shut down the campuses, end the genocide," among others. And as you can even hear sloganeering at these particular protest sites. As per Gaza officials, over 34,600 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's military operations in Gaza. Let's listen in to some of these protesters who had spoken from the site.
I think that they need to stop killing babies, all right? Stop dropping bombs on little babies in Palestine, all right? It's out of control that we're funding this genocide. And that's it. The students are doing the right thing, trying to divest the boycott. That's right. They're doing the right thing.
We are told to go back to where we came from. I am a Russian Jewish refugee who had to run from Moscow with my family as a refugee seeking asylum right here. And now, 35 years later, I am being told that I should go back to my home where I came from in Europe. That's never my home, and this is not my home. My home is Israel, because that's ultimately where we come from and where we belong. And you know who else belongs there? Our neighbors, the Palestinians. Palestinians should be freed from Hamas, and that whole region should be freed from the regimes that are occupying those lands.
Now, taking your focus back to Canada, during a contentious trip to Amritsar in 2018, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Defence Minister Harjit Singh Sajjan faced diplomatic hurdles. Trudeau and Sajjan were told that their plane will not be allowed to land unless they met with the Congress Chief Minister, Captain Amrinder Singh. A report in the Globe and Mail, a Canadian daily, claimed that Trudeau and Sajjan were trying to avoid meeting Captain Amrinder Singh, as he had called the latter's father a terrorist for his association with the World Sikh Organization. Reluctantly, Trudeau and Sajjan agreed to the meeting, which centered on concerns about Sikh separatists in Canada, notably focusing on figures like Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Captain Singh presented a document listing several individuals urging Canada to take action against them, and this is in line with India's efforts to counter the Sikh separatism. The meeting itself was described as tense, with Canadian officials stating that Canadian law doesn't permit arrests solely based on views disliked by New Delhi, which displeased Indian officials, especially in the external affairs. The dossier was provided during a period when CSIS had been collaborating with India's intelligence agency, Research and Analysis Wing RAW, to investigate the activities of Sikh separatists living in Canada. Now, despite prior assurances of Trudeau's condemnation of the terrorism and extremism, the trip faced initial turbulence, with revelations that Jaspal Atwal, previously convicted for a 1980s assassination attempt on an Indian minister, was invited to receptions with the Prime Minister, creating further diplomatic challenges. Now, with that, we're slipping into a short break, but do stay tuned to News9 Live as we come back with more on the other side.
trying a lot of experiments, innovations and ideas.
We came out with a new format in audio, which is audio series.
Listening for content-oriented company in India, which is a very unique proposition.
When you look at audio in general, we had music, which is like extremely old format, and then we had podcast.
A natural extension to Pocket FM is to move from Hindi to regional content. I think I'd love to see their FY24 numbers, which they claim will be close to 1,000 crores. I think there are talks of them to raise another $80 to $100 million of funding.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
Welcome back. You're watching News9 Live, and at the top of this segment, we take your focus and back to Maldives. India has withdrawn 51 of its soldiers from the Maldives, and the withdrawal comes ahead of the May 10th deadline set by the Maldivian President Mohamed Muizzu for the complete withdrawal of Indian military personnel from his country. The Maldivian government earlier announced that 2 batches of Indian soldiers had left the country. According to previous announcements made by the Maldives government, 88 Indian soldiers were stationed in the country to operate 2 helicopters, a Dornier aircraft and at the Sinahia military hospital. The 2 helicopters and the Dornier aircraft were gifted by India. President Muizzu is widely seen as a pro-China leader and has been engaging China for more investments in the archipelago nation. Up next, we take your focus to French President Emmanuel Macron and the EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, who urged the Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday to ensure more balanced trade with Europe, but the Chinese leader showed little sign of being ready to offer major concessions.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Europe for the first time in 5 years at a time of growing economic and trade tensions. She was in Paris on Monday, where French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen urged him to ensure more balanced trade with Europe. We have a responsibility to ensure a level playing field for all, Macron said ahead of talks during the 2-day visit. The EU is investigating Chinese industries such as electric vehicle exports, while Beijing has started an anti-dumping probe on French cognac. For his part, Xi says China's relationship with Europe is a foreign policy priority. China always views its relations with the EU from a strategic and long-term perspective, he said. During the Monday visit, Macron and Xi also reviewed French troops at an honor guard ceremony. Chinese state media reported that Xi, behind closed doors, said he hoped EU institutions would, quote, develop the right perception of China. French diplomatic sources said the Chinese president appeared receptive to his counterpart's comments on trade, but it's unclear if that will lead to action.
The world cannot absorb China's surplus production.
While speaking to reporters, von der Leyen said both sides' relationship is hurt by unequal market access and Chinese state subsidies.
I am convinced that if the competition is fair, we in Europe will have thriving, durable economies that will support more good jobs.
Chinese media reported that Xi told the leaders, from a global perspective, he doesn't think there's a problem with overcapacity. Still, a sticking point on the European side is that EU members, especially France and Germany, are not united in their attitude towards China. Macron also pressed the Chinese leader to use his influence on Russia to end the war in Ukraine. According to state media, Xi said China has been working vigorously to facilitate peace talks.
Next up, Chinese President Xi Jinping has appointed senior diplomat Xu Feihong as new ambassador to India after an unusually long delay of 18 months. And the latest uptick in the diplomatic relations comes amid frozen relations between the two countries over the eastern Ladakh military standoff. While there is no official announcement that's been made yet, the Chinese Foreign Ministry confirmed that Xu, who was the ambassador to Afghanistan and Romania, has been appointed as China's new envoy in India. Moving on, we bring to you some of the climate crisis stories that we are now going to cover. The world just experienced its hottest April on record, extending an 11-month streak in which each month was the hottest recorded month on record, as per the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service in a monthly bulletin. Now, scientists have already confirmed climate change caused some specific weather extremes in April, including a heat wave in the Sahel linked to potentially thousands of deaths. Heat waves also affected many Asian countries, with governments opting to choose close schools in the Philippines and Cambodia to protect student health, while heat also reached dangerous temperatures across India and Bangladesh. In the 12 months ending with April, the world's average temperature was the highest on record for a 12-month period at 1.61 degrees Celsius above the average in the 1850 to 1900 period, pre-industrial period. Greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels are the main cause of climate change, and in the recent months, the natural El Nino phenomenon, which warms the surface waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean, has also raised temperatures. Countries agreed that 1.5 Celsius goal at a UN climate summit in 2015, and it is the level scientists say would avoid the most disastrous consequences of global warming, like fatal heat, flooding, and the irreversible loss of ecosystems. Technically, the 1.5C target has not yet been missed, as it refers to an average global temperature over decades, but some scientists have said that the goal can no longer realistically be met and have urged governments to cut their carbon dioxide emissions faster to limit the overshoot of their targets. Now, bringing you some weather updates from across the globe, we first off start with Brazil. A submerged plane and runways underwater in southern Brazil on Tuesday after heavy rain lashed the city of Porto Alegre. Brazilian president asked Congress on Monday to recognize a state of public emergency due to heavy rains. Floods have destroyed roads and bridges in several cities, triggering landslides and leaving a path of destruction. The devastating rains have claimed the lives of 90 and left over 130 people missing in the country's southernmost state of Rio Grande do Sul. South Africa's coastal city of Durban, known for its popular beaches and warm climate, is facing a severe water crisis ahead of the national elections. Residents suffering from prolonged dry taps and poor sanitation services have complained about the same. The shortages, which some communities have endured for months, have been blamed on mismanagement and alleged corruption by the ruling African National Congress Party. In the northern suburbs, people have relied on water donations organized by community groups like the Voice of Phoenix. The crisis has taken a financial toll too, with households having to buy drinking water daily. The ANC has been accused of failing to address Durban's crumbling infrastructure. Durban's woes have been compounded by severe flooding that has damaged a lot of their infrastructure as well. Next up, we take you to Texas, the Houston area and the rest of southeast Texas, which were hit by heavy rainfall and flooding for several days, began to witness the receding of floodwaters on Monday. While no deaths or major injuries were reported in the Houston area, a tragic incident occurred involving a 4-year-old boy who was swept up in the fast floodwaters in North Texas, and this was early Sunday morning. National Weather Service meteorologist Jimmy Fowler cautioned motorists to exercise caution when encountering the flooded streets. Let's listen in to what's being said.
Basically, where all that rain was falling into those lakes and reservoirs, it's all trying to get out and it really can't get out too fast. So we've been seeing a lot of those rivers kind of going out of its banks, going into major flooding, as well as, approaching into some homes and roads and stuff like that, damaging that. We have not heard of any casualties at this point, so that is some good news, but there is definitely a lot of road structural issues around, especially near the lakes and rivers. So we've had so much rainfall this past week that it's going to take potentially the next few weeks for these rivers to get out of flood. We could see major river flooding along the Trinity and San Jacinto rivers for at least the next week or longer.
Well, with that now, we're slipping into a short break, but do stay tuned to News 9 Live as we come back with more on the other side.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching News 9 Live, and at the top of this segment, we begin with news from Japan. Officials in a Japanese town are erecting an 8.2 feet high barrier to block a view of the Mount Fuji and obstruct a photo spot that has been attracting so many visitors that they have now become a nuisance for locals. Take a look at this report.
This Instagrammable view of Mount Fuji will soon be blocked. Officials in the Japanese town are putting up a high barrier to obstruct a famous photo spot, which has been attracting so many visitors. They have become an annoyance for locals. Visitors have been flocking to the small town of Fujikawakuchiko to capture the famous view, the coupling of Mount Fuji and a local convenience store. The crowds have led to complaints of litter, danger to road traffic, and illegal parking. Local resident Haruhito Tsuchiya.
I've seen people walk into roads, people using electronic kickboards without following traffic rules and getting into accidents. There have been many accidents involving foreign tourists recently.
The 8-foot-high barrier is due for completion in the middle of May. It's the latest sign of Japan's struggle to accommodate an unprecedented surge in visitors amid a slump in the nation's currency. The weak yen has made Japan an irresistible bargain for travelers, which is good news for the economy, but has also raised concerns of over-tourism.
Now, dozens remain missing on Tuesday, May 7th, after an unfinished multi-story building collapsed in the South African city of George on Monday. Take a look at this particular report.
Rescuers were searching through the rubble of a multi-story building in the South African city of George on Tuesday. The unfinished building collapsed on Monday afternoon, leaving several dead and trapping dozens more. Colin Diner, Chief of Disaster Management for the Western Cape Province, said they were focusing on areas where they have been hearing people.
It's going to get more and more difficult as the days go on because we're going to have to stop lifting the structures off, so that's when we'll start bringing in cranes. But at the moment we've got areas we're focusing. There's quite a few more live people. It's the most I've ever seen in a structural collapse like this.
Of the 75 workers who had been on the construction site, 48 remained unaccounted for on Tuesday. Authorities have made no comment about what caused the collapse. President Cyril Ramaphosa offered his condolences to the families of the deceased. He has called for an investigation.
Well, with that now, we've come to an end to this bulletin, but do stay tuned to News9 Live through the day as we come back with more updates. Thank you for watching.
It's stealthy, lethal, and precise. The BrahMos kills warships. It flies 3 times the speed of sound. Once it acquires the target, it can cut through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China has assembled the world's largest navy. Its neighbors are feeling threatened by the Dragon's military might. Many of them are turning to BrahMos to enhance their firepower.